This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. Is it even conceivable that the mighty, powerful United States of America could be attacked militarily by another foe? Most people might say, no, absolutely not. And if you look at it from a human standpoint, you might be right. But we mustn't look at it just from a human standpoint. We must look at what the Bible tells us. And the Bible is dogmatically clear that the United States of America will be attacked very soon in a nuclear war. And if you look carefully as to what is happening today, you might be able to see the signs which clearly show us that those events are coming upon us in a very near future. Now, most people have been looking at comments which President Trump made at the summit with Mr. Putin regarding whom he believes more, Mr. Putin or his intelligent agents. And of course, this has caused all kinds of reaction, even in the United States, even by Mr. Trump's allies. And so an apology, a retraction, a clarification was issued, however you want to call it. But other things happened at that summit, before the summit, subsequent to the summit, which are perhaps even more important in the light of biblical prophecy, which most papers have not really commented on that much. And that's what I like to do today, because that goes really into the issue of a coming war. A coming war. Now, many of you might scoff. I hope those of you who are listening are not scoffing. But most Americans would probably dismiss this concept right away, saying that is just not possible. And they are living in a dream world. I hope that you are not living in a dream world. I'd like to read to you from some articles which were published this week. Here's one by Newsmax, dated July 17, quoting Pat Buchanan, saying this: Trump has signaled a historic shift in U.S. foreign policy that may determine the future of this nation. He said, Trump's message has been clear, consistent, startling. NATO is obsolete. European allies have freeloaded off U.S. defense while rolling up huge trade surpluses at our expense. Those days are over. Europeans are going to stop stealing our markets and start paying for their own defense. And then he went on to say, America is coming home from foreign wars and will be shedding foreign commitments. And so more and more Europeans are realizing that they cannot rely on America for their defense or even on NATO. Here's an article by Euractiv, dated July 13, saying this: There is no longer confidence in NATO, a diplomat told Euractiv. Fewer and fewer European countries trust that the US would defend them if they were invaded by Russia. Under Trump, NATO will soon be as dead as the proverbial dodo. The EU needs to overcome its internal divisions fast and make sure NATO is replaced by a real European defense alliance. And that is a viewpoint which is being expressed over and over again in Europe. Here's an article by the Washington Post, dated July 12. Trump has been calling NATO a waste of money for decades. America has no vital interest in Europe, he wrote in 2000. Their conflicts are not worth American lives. Pulling back from Europe would save this country millions of dollars annually. The cost of stationing NATO troops in Europe is enormous, and these are clearly funds that can be put to better use. And even yesterday, Mr. Trump raised his concerns again regarding NATO. The Huffington Post wrote on July 18 that President Donald Trump on Tuesday once again through cold water on NATO, which obligates member countries to defend any other member country that comes under attack, during an interview with Fox News' Tucker Carlson. When Carlson asked why the US should protect a country like Montenegro, which joined NATO last year, Trump said he has asked himself the same question. Montenegro is a tiny country with very strong people, Trump said. They are very aggressive people, and they may get aggressive, and congratulations, you are in World War III. But that's the way it was set up. But it's clear that Mr. Trump doesn't like the way it was set up. And there are other countries in NATO. Think of Turkey being ruled by a ruthless dictator. What about the European Union? Many countries of Europe are part of NATO, of course. And notice what The Sun reported on July 13. Mr. Trump suggested to Mrs. May that a soft Brexit was a hostile move towards the US because the European Union is very bad to the United States on trade. But he went further. CBS News reported on July 15 that President Trump named the European Union when asked to identify his biggest foe globally right now. Well, I think we have a lot of foes, he said. I think the European Union is a foe, what they do to us in trade. Now, you wouldn't think of the European Union, but they are a foe. Russia is a foe in certain respects. China is a foe economically. Certainly, they are a foe. Now, you can imagine that that comment didn't go well with the Europeans, and so the EU Observer wrote on July 16. Trump designated the EU as an enemy, while talking about a trade war with Europe. To add insult to injury, the State Department said that it would impose sanctions on EU firms doing business with Iran. The refusal to exempt EU firms comes despite the fact Russia is to invest $50 billion in Iran's energy sector. Russia also sold Iran high-tech anti-aircraft systems with no Trump objections. The US turned the world upside down for the European Union. Let me just say this. Wars begin with words. And right now, words are being shot at each other like bullets. And so the European reaction was predictable, and especially Germany's responses. The Local wrote on July 13. Berlin was still reeling on Friday from US President Donald Trump's attacks on the NATO military alliance, with German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas warning that the US President was willfully damaging Western security. And former German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel said Europe should stand up to Trump, warning that the US President is pushing for regime change in Germany. We must no longer have any illusions, he said. Donald Trump only understands strength. So we have to show him that we are strong. If he demands, and now listen to this comment, if he demands billions back from us for the United States military spending, then we should demand billions back from him for the refugees produced by failed US military interventions, for example, in Iraq. You see the hostility developing between those two power blocs. Bloomberg added on July 16, if the American president identifies the European Union as a foe, this unfortunately shows once more how wide the Atlantic has become in political terms since Donald Trump has been in office, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said. EU member states must not allow themselves to be divided, he said, no matter how harsh the verbal attacks and how absurd the tweets may be. And so, based on all of these circumstances, Europe feels very strongly that they have to unite militarily very soon. And that is exactly what the Bible tells us is going to happen. Handelsblatt Global wrote on July 17. We saw a new world order loom like an iceberg at the meeting of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. The Russian leader emerged victorious at a press conference which was historic for all the wrong reasons. Trump, this is important, ignored Europe. Trump elevated Russia, an enemy, to an equal. That insistent support will have done lasting damage to transatlantic relations. Eastern European countries close to Russia have to wonder whether they can count on support from Washington in the future. And of course, a comment Mr. Trump made regarding Montenegro makes this a very real concern. Most Germans are opposed, not just to Donald Trump, but also to America as a whole. And as I said before, wars start with words. And when an entire nation, entire people are against another country, then that can easily happen. Deutsche Welle wrote on July 15, 2/3 of Germans think that the US president is more dangerous than his Russian counterpart, talking about a threat to world security. 56% of respondents thought that Putin was more competent than Trump, with only 5% preferring the latter on that score. 36% of Germans find Putin more likable than Trump, while 6% say the opposite. And perhaps most surprisingly, 44% said Putin was more powerful than Trump, compared with only 29% who thought that the US president has more power. The world's two most powerful men have one thing in common. Bild's lead story reads, they want to weaken Europe. That's the widespread view around Germany, where many people fear that Trump's occasional hostility to NATO, for instance, plays into Putin's strategic aim of dividing the West and increasing Russia's influence in the world. The distrust of Trump's motivations and leadership capabilities is apparent in how Germans see the United States as a whole. 59% of respondents said they viewed the United States negatively, compared with only 29% who chose positively. And Deutsche Welle added on July 13, Germans are under no doubts that Putin, for his part, is pursuing a long-term aggressive anti-European policy. Moscow has an interest in America withdrawing from Europe. So they see some very uncomfortable, dangerous signs. And so they conclude, we have to look at our own interests, and we are all by ourselves to do that. And so that's what they're going to do. And the Bible tells you that is what's going to happen. A very powerful military will be built. Now, even if it's not as powerful as the United States Army might be, that doesn't matter, because God has said Europe will attack the United States in a nuclear war, and they will win that war. Now, most don't believe that. Most totally ignore that, don't want to accept it. But how many, let's say in Japan, thought that a nuclear bomb would be dropped on their cities? How many thought that they could evaporize within a second? That their lives could be snuffed out within a second? And how many thought that others would have lasting damage? Today we find words being shot like bullets. Pretty soon it won't be words alone. I wonder how many will scoff then. I hope you are not one who is scoffing about these things. I hope you are one who is preparing for the inevitable, because that is prophesied in your Bible, and I don't care how many dismiss it. I don't care how many don't believe it. I don't care how many scoff at God and His prophecies. That is what the Bible tells you. We have a free booklet prepared, Europe in Prophecy, The Unfolding of End-Time Events. This booklet tells you very clearly from the pages of the Bible what is going to happen to the United States of America, to Great Britain, to Canada, New Zealand, Australia, other English-speaking nations. It is prophesied. It is going to happen in the end time, just prior to Christ's return. Believe it or not, it doesn't make any difference. These things will happen, but it will make a big difference for you and for the lives of your loved ones. If you keep scoffing, that day will come upon you like a thief in the night. And when they say peace, then sudden destruction will come upon them. I pray that you are not one of them who is foolish enough to ignore the warning which is being given to you in God's Word, the Bible. Thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.